Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our DMO Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. Awkward pauses. Awkward. I don't know why. I just chose to awkwardly pause during that intro.
You got to shake it up here and there.
I do. It got very Captain Kirk.
Yeah, you got to have some build some suspense. Just drop random pauses where they don't need to be.
Unlike Captain Kirk, we never pause. Not only do we give you an episode every week, sometimes now we're giving you 2 episodes in a week. And this is such a week because joining us once again is our friend Chip Midnight. He's back with another interview. Hi, Chip.
Hello. I was trying to think how to do that one word pause. I can't really do hello as a pause, but hello. Good evening. Good afternoon, whenever you're listening to this.
Good evening.
Yes.
Excellent. What platter of interview words do you bring to us this time?
So I started a blog in 97, 98, 99, something like that. I don't remember.
You were just like a young child then, like 3 or 4 years old.
I was just a young child. And I don't remember how I got a copy of this CD. It was either from a publicist in the mail, or maybe I picked up a promo copy at Used Kids Records because they used to throw out SubPop promos. But with the name SubPop on it, I'm sure that's kind of what intrigued me. For this episode, I interviewed Heather Duby. Now, Heather was signed to SubPop. She put out her debut record, Post to Wire, in 1999. I really liked that album in 1999, and I still listen to it quite a bit. To me, it's very unlike what was coming out on SubPop at the time. I'd be interested in hearing what other people think. I did have a chance to interview Ben from Band of Horses, who was in Seattle at the time. And when I mentioned to him that I was going to be interviewing an artist that was on SubPop around the time that he was, getting his start and working in Seattle, I told him that it was something to me that was a little bit unusual. And when I told him it was the interview I was going to do was with Heather Duby, he was like, no, that totally fit into the label at the time. So maybe I'm wrong, but to me, Heather's debut, Post to Wire, it's got some electronic elements. She worked pretty closely with Steve Fisk on the album, and I know that Steve has been a guest on the podcast in the past, and so Steve brings that production, that electronic sound to things. Heather's put out a couple records since then, and definitely does not have all those electronic embellishments. So I think this was sort of in her career, sort of like a one-off, but a great introduction to folks.
Awesome. I was not familiar, Jay. Were you familiar with this album?
I wasn't. And, based on the timing, SubPop, the Steve Fisk connection, I'm surprised I hadn't heard of her.
Yeah.
She, I interviewed her in 1999, and, we'll do that thing that they say in podcasts, like we'll put it in the show notes, a link to it. So, I mean, I talked to her 23 years ago, and then I think maybe over the years, maybe through different platforms, MySpace, probably originally at some point, or Facebook or Instagram, every 6-7 years, I'd say, hey, listening to Heather's music today or something. We'd trade a quick note, but nothing really, we didn't really keep in touch per se. But when we started talking about doing this series for Dig Me Out, I kind of went through artists that I would like to catch up with that I've already talked to in the past, in addition to the bands and artists that I have never talked to. And Heather's name, I was just interested in finding out whatever happened with her. And so she was top of my list, and she might've been one of the first people I reached out to for Dig Me Out and to do these interviews. You'll hear in the interview, but she put out a record in 2020. We joke that, putting it out during the middle of the pandemic was perfect timing. She had Steve Shelley from Sonic Youth play drums, and she actually had, as I mentioned in the interview, friend of the show, because we can say that now, John Agnello produced the record. She actually met him at a bar that she worked at, and they started talking music, and thus a relationship was born. So she did put out a record in 2020. You can find it on all the streaming services, Bandcamp, and all that kind of stuff. But Jay mentioned, and both of you mentioned, that you don't really know her music and had never really heard of her. She didn't really do a bunch of touring. The record came out and things came up in her life, and again, she wasn't. I don't know that the label really knew who to put her on the road with. So, you couldn't really put her on. In the 1999 interview, she told me that she played like a showcase, maybe a CMJ showcase with Nebula, which when you hear Heather's music, if you're not familiar with it, you'll see how absurd that sounds. So
That's a strange combination.
yeah, so it's not like Sub Pop had a roster of these kind of electronic artists. I guess she could have done stuff with I don't know if Pigeonhed toured, but like she could have done stuff maybe in that world. But I don't think it ever happened. I know she did some touring with Minus a Bear.
Yeah, she sang on a couple of records.
Yeah, and she's had some of the folks from Minus a Bear kind of guest on her records, so she has that relationship. But really, yeah, not a ton of touring, and we go into reasons for that in the interview.
Got it. All right, well let's get to that interview. Thanks, Chip.
So welcome to another episode of Dig Me Out. I'm really excited about this interview because as I was going through my list of bands that I'd interviewed and artists I'd interviewed in the 90s, I wanted to catch up with some of the people I haven't talked to in a long time. And one of those people is Heather Duby. Heather, welcome to the Dig Me Out podcast.
Hello.
So
thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I interviewed you in 1999. You had just released Post to Wire on SubPop Records. And as Dig Me Out is a podcast about the 90s, we'll talk about the 90s a little bit and we'll talk about the record, but I also want to give you a chance to talk about things other than the 90s. But to get us kind of grounded and started, the 90s was, I was gonna say a long decade, but every decade is 10 years, right? It's not that long. And it was a long time ago, but can you tell me sort of like where you were at the beginning of the 90s?
Well, let's see. I finished high school in 92 and I was leaving where I grew up and I was going to Evergreen State College in Olympia. And that was when Unwound was playing in Olympia a lot, which was that was great. I didn't make it to their shows because I was intimidated by that whole scene, but I'm a big fan of theirs. So that was going on in that area. And then, but I was only at Evergreen for a year and a half. I decided to leave school because I wanted to just focus on music. And I left Olympia and moved up to Seattle. And I was by myself and I just started playing around there. But there was so much good music going on in the whole region at that time. What was great about growing up in the Portland area was that there was access to a lot of all ages venues, or 21 and up venues also. So if you were underage, you could still go see bands. And Seattle didn't actually have that. Seattle had a much stricter ordinance as far as like kids being able to go to shows. So I felt really fortunate to grow up around Portland because you could go see bands. And but yes, it was such a long time ago.
Right. I keep seeing this T-shirt that says I might be old, but I saw all the cool bands. And I think like in the early 90s, I mean, like you, I got to see, or I don't know what you saw in the 90s, but I mean, that was a great time to be able to go to concerts, I think.
It was. Yeah, it really was. I saw a lot of local bands, and then I also saw like a lot of like some of the bigger bands. And I remember I saw Nirvana and the Red Hot Chili Peppers at the Salem Armory. And I think that was when I was still in high school. And then what else? There was so much. I saw the Melvins and that band Carp. Carp was great, playing at the Capitol Theater backstage area, because they used to not in like the seated part of the auditorium, but in the backstage. What else? Just a ton of stuff. I mean, sorry.
Were there bands that you saw that didn't make it that you thought, like when you were watching them, like, oh, this band's going to be playing the arena down the street someday and I can't wait for that?
The band that comes to mind when you mention that is the band Pond.
Oh yeah.
They were a Portland band. they did do some arenas. They did do some arena stuff after that, but I sort of thought that they would keep going, and they didn't really seem to do a whole lot after that. But I was always a big fan of theirs even before I saw them up in Seattle. So I got to see them in Portland a few times. I had a cassette tape when I was a freshman of the Dharma Bums, which is a great band. And so there was a lot of stuff like that didn't really like catch on and get even larger, but that I got to see, and they were all like really distinctive. Their sounds were all really distinctive. Later in the 90s, like, more towards the 2000s and stuff, like I saw like Quasi and that band Fuck. I think that was at Satyricon in Portland, but that was much later. That was like after I'd moved away. And so.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to put in a plug for the listeners to join the Patreon for Dig Me Out, because you get access to the Discord message board group. I think that's what Discord is. It's a Discord discussion group. And Pond is actually a band that has been talked about recently among the people who are part of that Discord group. And that inspired me to pull out the album that came out after. They had an album called Rock Collection. Does that sound right?
I think so.
Whatever the album is after that, it's literally sitting in my car right now. I have a CD player in my car, and I listened to Pond last week, so that's funny that you.
Oh, that's
them.
great.
Yeah, so
they're really nice guys too. They're nice people.
Yeah, so you moved to Seattle and you want to pursue music. How hard or easy was it at that time? I mean, I think historically, if we look at documentaries or read books, it's thriving. Nirvana, SubPop starting to take off. Was it easy to work your way into it, or was it still a challenge just like anywhere else?
No, it was actually really difficult. I found. I think I got bumped from some shows here and there, like at venues. Like there was a whole process of trying to get booked in the venues where like the bands that I wanted to be playing with, where they were performing. Like when I started out, it was just me playing acoustic guitar with, really bad songs. And like playing like the more of like the college circuit down in like Pioneer Square, like college venues where like, people are going to get drunk and they're not really going to listen to music. They're just going so they can be in the bar. And one of them, I wasn't 21 yet. So I think I was only 20, because I moved to Seattle when I was 19, I think. And so I was 20 and I was just playing. And I remember it being a big deal that I wasn't 21 yet and I was playing in this bar. It was called Dutch Ned's, and it was in really far South Pioneer Square. I don't even know if it's still there. It might be. I don't know. But so there was this whole process of me, trying to get stuff together enough so that I could play in venues where the bands that I really liked and that I admired were playing. And then I started playing with Reggie Watts and Ryan Link, and we had a 3-piece.
So it's funny. I remember when I talked to you in 1999, we talked about Clementine, the band that you were in with Reggie and Ryan. I knew who Reggie was at the time. Oh, you introduced me to Mock-Tube. I did not know. I think I knew the name. Again, I don't expect you to remember this interview, but my friend Brad Smith from Blind Melon had produced Mock-Tube, and that's how I knew about Mock-Tube.
Okay.
And then and you told me about Clementine, and here we are 23 years later. And I don't know if you ever recorded anything, but I cannot find anything. And I think the way you described it back then, I've been searching for it. Is there any recorded material from that time?
I don't know where it is. I don't know.
And it's funny, Ryan, I interviewed Ryan.
We recorded some stuff, but we didn't ever release anything.
Yeah. I interviewed Ryan. He had a band called Misfortune.
Yep.
And I did not know that he was part of Clementine when I interviewed you before. Like, he reached out to me a year, 2, 3, something like that later. And I didn't realize that Ryan was part of that band until like a week ago. When that sort of blew my mind, because I know his name. We traded emails back in the day, and an acquaintance of mine, I think, may have played guitar in Misfortune. A guy named Jay Barclay. I don't know if you know that name at all, but Small world, a lot of connections all over the place, it seems like.
Yeah.
So was Clementine, like, was that a real band to the point where like you had labels checking you out where you thought it was going to be something, or was that something where you were just playing with some friends?
I think we had hoped that would be the way that it would evolve, but then we all also had our own projects that we were doing, and Reggie also had done some work with Steve Fisk, who I did Post to Wire with. Reggie had done some work with Steve Fisk for some Pigeonhed stuff with Sean Smith, and so we all knew each other, so there wasn't any sort of acrimony or anything about it. But Clementine just kind of dissolved. It wasn't really a big deal. I think it was like everyone was doing other things as well. Like everyone just got sort of busy, and it got kind of put on the back burner. And I don't think any of us were too upset about it. But we had a good time when we were playing together, and it was always, I really enjoyed our practices. I really enjoyed like our practice space and working stuff out. And I was still like fairly new with guitar, and they were really patient. They were better players than I was, and they were super supportive. And so that was a great experience for me to have as a first band, to get to work with both of them. And I'm still good friends with both of them. And we don't talk too often. Everyone's really busy, but I that's like, it was a really valuable experience for me to get to play with them. So
Yeah. I mean, Reggie has gone on to do a lot of great stuff.
Yeah.
It's funny when I see him on TV or on Netflix specials or wherever I see him. Like, I love those mock tube records, and I keep thinking, like, man, do people know that he's this musical genius and that he's created such great music? Like, he's not out like, I don't know that people know that stuff.
Right. Well, I don't know if they do either. Like just the incredible range that he has as a person and as a performer. And I mean, it just goes and goes and goes.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that's how you met Steve Fisk.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I think Reggie introduced he and I. Yep.
And you were waiting tables at the time to pay bills and stuff.
Yep. I still do that.
Yeah.
Still do that.
When I talked to, I mentioned I mentioned to you in an email that I had talked to Ben from Band of Horses, and he said he knew you from Seattle. And did you guys work together, or did you just know each other from music scenes? I know he told me all about like washing dishes and living in in club spaces and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. We had a lot of friends in common. I used to date someone that was in his band. When after his first record came out, like his touring band, I used to date someone that so we knew a lot of the same people, and we were in a lot of the same shows and everything like that. So
was it in Seattle at that time, like around the time of this when you signed us up, was it a pretty strong music community? I mean, like, were all of your friends music related somehow, or did you have other friends that weren't music people?
Well, I've always had friends from kind of two different communities. Tons of friends from music, and then tons of friends from working in restaurants, because they're not always synonymous. But I would say that let's see, I lived in Seattle from like 94 to 2008. And I would, for myself, the music community was very strong. Very strong. Yeah.
So 94, that was after Nirvana had blown up.
Yeah.
Okay. So you didn't bump into those guys walking down the street or anything, or were they out and
No.
about in Seattle now?
No, I didn't. The first cafe that I worked at, one of the guys from Alice in Chains used to come in fairly regular, and I met a lot of people that were like booking agents and management, and people that worked around those bands a lot, but not the players as much.
So you start working with Steve. And what I don't remember, did you have the songs and then Steve kind of came in and worked on them, or did you guys collaborate on them, or how did Poster Wire come together, and how was your relationship with Steve on that record?
So I would write stuff at home, and then I would bring it. So the record really was kind of in two sections. So I would write stuff at home and then bring it to him, and then we would change things, add different textures, rearrange stuff, like move sections, just do a whole lot of work on making those ideas better. And then there were a couple that were more fully formed that didn't require that much changing. And then we really were presented with the challenge of trying to have it all like sit together, as one record. And we had quite a few things that we threw out that we didn't even end up using. We worked on it for a really long time, because it just kind of it continued to evolve, like as we, a lot of like a normal, it seems to me that like a normal band situation, the songs are written, you go in and make the record and you're done. This was really more of a collaborative, like writing process as we did it. So it was a really different approach in that respect.
Did you wait until you had the collection of songs to go to SubPop, or was SubPop already interested? Were you already going to put it out on SubPop?
So SubPop was already interested and had committed to the project for the most part. I'm so sorry, my dog. Riley,
no worries.
Lay down. So they had already committed to it, and it just was a matter of time as to when they decided that it was finished.
Yeah.
So
what was it like being signed to SubPop? I mean, not only the clout of the label, but were they helpful financially to you, or were they just a distribution method for you?
Yeah, there was some support from SubPop. When we were finished, we were given a small amount of money, and I think Steve was helped with his studio a bit. And that was kind of the extent of it. I was released from my contract with them. They chose not to release my second record. So that was it.
Yeah. Again, I'm going back to that interview that we did 23 years ago. And I think I asked you about touring, and I think you had mentioned that you had done some sort of maybe a CMJ showcase, or like you were on some bill with Nebula. And because I was asking how you fit in with other bands in the label. And because to me at the time, I don't remember at the time, honestly. And actually, when I talked to Ben from Band of Horses, and I mentioned that I was going to be interviewing a SubPop artist from the late 90s that in my mind didn't seem to fit into the SubPop label. And when I told him it was you, he was like, she totally fit into the SubPop label.
Thanks,
so I do think as the 90s were coming to an end, SubPop was changing. It wasn't all punk rock and grunge. It was they were branching out. And did you feel like you were the black sheep on the SubPop family, or did you feel like you had camaraderie with other bands and that you sort of felt part of the family from a music perspective?
Well, I mean, I had a great musical partnership in my working relationship with Steve, and still do. Like he's so dear to me, and and Jonathan really helped us with that record and listened to songs as they were finished, and the what I was told was that well, I guess to answer your question, I didn't really, at that particular time in 1999, I didn't feel that a lot of camaraderie with anyone else on the label. Later when they did like the Murder City Devils, those guys are great, and they were always just awesome. They were always great to me, and like because I mean it is certain, like it sort of sticks out, like this whole I'm not like that Post to Wire is not like a mirror record, or like what I mean. There's a certain and her stuff was coming out at that time too, so it's like so like I feel like she would have been a more natural fit than what I was doing.
Yeah.
You know, and I have a lot of I really admire her work. I think she's really wonderful. So, you know, so it's not something that upsets me. It's just, I think it's just the way that's the way it was at the time, you know. The second record that I made, I thought would have been still a good fit, but it, you know, from their view, it was too much of a departure from what the first record was. And, you know, that's fine. That's their prerogative. You know, I moved forward with it anyway, with, you know, regardless. So
I do think I still have the Post to Wire CD. I still have the CD player in my car, like I mentioned with the Pond CD, and I still listen to Post to Wire maybe like once a year, I think. And I think it's still like, I think it sounds relevant today. Like, I don't think it sounds dated. Like, you know, there's a lot of artists I feel like that are sort of doing what you did 22 years ago, mixing different elements, different production styles, different electronic elements, along with, you know, female vocalists. Like that stuff is still popular.
well, and something I would say too is as far as what we did with the arrangements, like with the songs that I brought to them, is that the songs themselves are still kind of, they're not really that formulaic. They're all kind of just sort of, you know, the arrangements are kind of different, and, you know, they're not so much like A, B, you know, so yeah, I mean, I think the record is really kind of, I always viewed it kind of, or heard it as being like sort of cinematic almost. It's like evokes a lot of imagery still for me. And I think, you know, my own writing changed after that record. It kind of shifted. I wanted to do, there was other stuff that I wanted to work on, that I wanted to get better at as far as a writer, as a songwriter. So, but yeah, I think that record is just, it's kind of its own thing. It's very, so.
You know, it's funny when you said cinematic, and I was trying to think like, what could I compare it to? And I'm hearing Falter in my head, and I'm thinking like, that's very St. Vincent like. And I've always thought of St. Vincent as cinematic and like twisted Disney music or something like that. And I can hear, like, now that I'm kind of putting my memory to the test here of Post to Wire, like that might be a comparable artist maybe, and at least some of the songs, I think.
Yeah, I haven't listened to St. Vincent. I have to must confess, because I like, I'm sort of in a cave, and there's so much music I haven't heard, but yeah. But
so, like you said, SubPop chose not to put out the next record. I think you put it out on Sonic Boom Records.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Tell me more about that label, because I remember that label, but I remember the name of the label, and I have you had an EP in between, right?
I did it. I had an EP that I did, which was more like dance music. It was more electronic, and that was with Reggie. Reggie helped with that also. Reggie played with this Skylar Gilmore, I think, was like a drum and bass DJ. So there's some great tracks off of that turned out pretty well. So we did that EP, and then I had some things going on in my personal life that were really, really just unparalleled, that had to do with meeting my biological family. And so I changed my songwriting, and Jason Hughes, who does the Sonic Boom record stores, had the Sonic Boom label, and he was willing to help me, and he released it. And so I did that record with him, and then I did another full length, the self-titled one, which he released that one as well. So yeah.
Going into Post to Wire, you had spent a couple of years kind of honing your songcrafting and everything. Was the dream to make music, to make that your career, to be on big stages, or was that something like when you were making, after SubPop didn't pick up the next record, was it sort of like, okay, I got to think about what else I'm going to do here, or were you pushing and still trying to make it on those during that early 2000s period?
Well, let's see. I have a couple things to say. First of all, I read I went back and read the interview that we did back in '99, and I was so embarrassed at how thoughtless I was about so many of the things that I said. And I just thought, that's really just like the arrogance of youth. I just was young, and I wasn't being thoughtful about the things that I said. And I was obviously still I was upset about some things that I was dealing with. And so I wanted to state that. And when I was on SubPop and we did Post to Wire, I was really aspirational. I really did want to, I wanted to tour I wanted to be on tour. I wanted to perform all over. I wanted to travel. A big motivation about playing music was, the opportunity to travel. And that's, something that my other friends that play music, that they, that's what they've wanted to do too. And I've never been able to do very much of that at all. So that's been disappointing. But when I was released from my contract with SubPop, I didn't really, because of the things I was dealing with in my personal life, with meeting my biological family at the age of 26, which is not, that's not a very typical experience. I have a good friend who also has gone. I have a couple of good friends who have gone through that process, but it's, it's quite a lot to process.
Oh yeah.
And the stuff I was dealing with about that, I couldn't really think about trying to make music I couldn't continue to think about it in the same way anymore, because I was just trying to cope with and get to a place that felt normal with the stuff going on in my personal life. Which was difficult, but I did have some great opportunities. I got to play in New York City quite a bit it felt like quite a bit to me. I got to perform at Joe's Pub, which was really a great honor. I got to play at some venues that I had only have ever hoped to be. I would never have expected to get to play at the places that I performed. And so, and I got to go out on tour with Minus the Bear. I was singing with them. I was doing some backup work with them, and they were always great to me. And I have no complaints. I mean, it's just, but I had to sort of adjust my thinking, because I was just, but I also I didn't realize what I had lost when I was released from that label. I didn't really understand the scope of it, that it would, that it would be, that it would be hugely limiting. And I regret the ways, the way that I was maybe cavalier, but that was not, it wasn't out of ill will. It was just, it was just the foolishness of being young and upset about stuff that that had nothing to do with music. I mean, young, when you're young, you're upset.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I don't think really you're the only songwriter who's ever felt that way. I think it's a tale as old as time.
Person. Yeah,
absolutely.
You're upset.
So I will admit that I didn't realize that you had put out so many records in the early 2000s. Like every couple of years you were putting something out.
Yeah, it was. Yep. Nothing really went longer than 4 years, and then after I moved to the East Coast, so in 2008 I moved, or 2007 I moved to the East Coast, and then I did an EP that I released in 2011, and I did that with Matt Bayless, which was a great experience. I had a great band that I was working with, Tom Barrett and Tom Unish. We had a 3-piece, and we played. We did a couple shows with Reggie. We played at pianos and on the Lower East Side, and Union Pool and Mercury Lounge, and so a lot of like great venues. And when we recorded, it's no longer there, I think, but we recorded at Headgear Studios, which is over there in Williamsburg. This guy Alex's place. And some great records were done there. Some TV and the radio records were done there. And and it was really fun to get to record with Matt, because I'd wanted to work with him for a long time. And I think that EP turned out really well. So It's called Latency. It's the kind of, it's got the illustration on the cover my friend Natalia did.
Oh yeah, nice. And then you started going to law school around that time or after that, or what was, you went to law school at some point?
Yeah, so I moved to the East Coast in 2007. I released that EP in 2011. I think it was in January of 2011. And in July of that year, I was in a really bad accident with my bike and a truck, and my hands were run over because I'm lucky like that. And I was pinned under the truck.
Wow.
And I had 10 surgeries. I was going to school at that time. So when I left Evergreen, after 10 years, your credits don't transfer. So I had to redo all of my credits. So I had gone to community college while I was working almost full time in restaurants and still doing the band. And I'd gone to community college and gotten my associate's degree. And then I was in the accident. And then, so I had to take a year off from everything and have surgeries. And in 2012, I went to Rutgers, Newark, and got my BA, like finished my BA. And in 2014, I started law school, which had always been my plan, right? The only reason I went back to school was because I wanted to go to law school. That was the only reason I went back to, otherwise I would never have gone back to school. And so in 2014, I started law school, and then I graduated in 2017.
And then 2018, you started working on new music.
Yes. Yeah. So I graduated law school in 2017, and then I recorded that most recent EP that was recorded in December of 2018.
I've never been to law school. I don't have the.
I don't recommend it.
But at this point, yeah, that's far in my past. But so I don't understand the brain, the way it works for what you have to do. Did you have to put your creativity aside for
Absolutely.
your studies?
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly difficult. Yeah, it's really hard. I think maybe if you were, well, so like Steven Peterson from Cursive and Criteria, he went to law school, and I think maybe once you're practicing, maybe it's not as difficult. But when I was going, when I was in law school, I think being in law school is so different than when you're actually an attorney. And I'm not an attorney. I'm good. I went to law. That's all I'm good. I just wanted to find out if I could get that degree. I don't know why. I just did. It was, and I think it also helped me recover from my accident.
Yeah. To
some degree. I think that taking on a really challenging intellectual project like that, for me, was a good way for me to get past what had happened with my hands. Because they were supposed to be amputated. As that was like, initially they thought they'd be amputated. So, and someone asked me about, about playing music. And for a long time, I was like, there's just no joy in it right now for me. It's not joyful. It still is frustrating. It's more frustrating than it's ever been, still, because of what happened to my hands. And that was, so I needed something else to do. So I might as well do something that I felt like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. Like, I wanted to drop out many times when I was in law school. I was like, I don't think I can do this because the workload is just enormous, so like an outline for one class, just the outline can be like 60 pages long. Just the outline, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
So, if you're taking, and I was doing other stuff at the time. When I was in law school, I was also working with the Brooklyn Volunteer Lawyers Project. I was, I just did like other sort of ancillary jobs like that. So when I was in law school, no, I wasn't able to write. But as soon as I graduated, and I was working at the reason I moved up to where I am now is because I had a 2-year fellowship with New York State. So I had a job when I finished law school. It was a 2-year placement with a state agency, and it was in a topic area that I was really, that was near and dear to my heart. That was part of the reason that I had wanted to go. And so, but when I was doing that job was when I started writing the most recent EP.
And how did you hook up with John Agnello? I would call him a friend of the Dig Me Out show, even though he appeared for like 10 minutes on one episode. He probably doesn't remember that, or doesn't even, Dig Me Out is probably one of 100 podcasts he's done. But for our sake, we'll call him a friend of the show. So how did you hook up with him, and how did he end up producing and working with you on the record?
So I've known John almost the whole time that I've been on the East Coast. So I've known him a long time. I was bartending in Jersey City, and he used to come into where I worked, Barcade, Jersey City. He used to come in there quite a bit, and we had a lot of mutual friends. And so we would just talk about music, and he was, it was a natural conversation to be like, oh, you should do something. We should do something. It was a no-brainer. And so it was just sort of a matter of when we would get to do that, when would we get the chance. And he's worked with Steve Shelley a lot. And then I had worked with Lori on Come Across the River, on the second record that I did, the first one that Sonic Boom released. So that was how those players came together. And Tom, who played guitar, used to play in the band that I had that I played around New York City with.
Oh, very cool. So you recorded it in 2018, and then you release it. I don't know the release date. Was it? Did you release it right in the middle of a pandemic?
I think I did. Yeah. I think I was just like, you know what? I don't care anymore. I'm just gonna. I don't know why I even sat on it that long. I think I just was like, I don't know what I'm doing with this thing. We made this record, and so yeah, I was just like, all right. And John was like, well, do you want to just like release one song at a time and see how it goes? And I was like, no, let's just get it. It's like pulling the tooth. Let's just get it out of the,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So that's out. Are the creative juices still going? Are you working on more stuff? Do you think you'll record something else soon, or are you in the midst of recording anything?
Well, I've written quite a bit. I haven't settled on any of it. That's kind of how I go about it. I've been writing quite a lot, and I got myself a mini electric guitar, which for me is awesome because I don't have any my reach is really substantially limited now. And Ben Varellen was kind enough to make another amp for me, so he sent that out. So I have I love my guitar setup now, and it's like really chimey and beautiful. It's really, so I've been writing, I write on guitar and I write on piano, and then I go back to guitar and then I go back to piano. And so I really want to get like a batch of songs together that I feel totally 100% like super strong about. Because now I'm not writing under as much pressure. When I was writing in 2018, before we recorded, like, the conditions of my life weren't really conducive to being able to sort of sit with ideas and ruminate, as I just was really under a lot more pressure because of my job and things like that. So I'm kind of enjoying it more now than I did then.
I think my last interview was with for Dig Me Out was with Adam Elk from the Mommy Heads, and we talked about, there's part of that, like when you're growing up and coming out and like your first record, like you've got the fire and the spirit, but when you put that many years between it, Adam said that the Mommy Heads have released more music in the last 5 years, after he's well into his 40s, than they did when they were young, and they were worried about how do we get signed, and once they got signed to Geffen, and how do we pay for this, and how do we pay for the manager? And he's like, now it's fun. He's like, I think he wants to put out a record every year because there is no pressure. And I was sort of joking with him, it's like almost being able to put some of that behind you. Like if musicians started when they were 40, they might be a lot happier, right? And you might not have all that pressure. You might just be like, all right, now I can just do what I want to do and not feel that pressure. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. They'd probably be just as neurotic at 40 if they were starting then as they are whenever they're, however young they are. Because I think it probably takes that long to filter through all of it and really sort of distill why it is that you're doing it, and what purpose is it serving for you, separate of all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And that just, so I don't know, but gosh, kids are obnoxious. I just like think about me. I was such a jerk. Like I was so upset, and I really thought I don't know. I just, that, you're talking about that fire, and I mean, it can really sort of cloud your vision.
Yeah.
So
as we started off this interview, and I mentioned, I know the 90s were a long time ago. Like I have bits and pieces of 90s memories, I don't remember everything. Can you, in a sentence or two, can you sort of sum up the 90s for you? Good, the bad, the memories. Like if we took Heather's 1990s and put it into a tweet, how would you describe the 90s, your experience in the 90s? Professionally, personally, whatever, however you want to, your memories of the 90s, the stamp of the 90s on your life.
Well, for me, it would have been just simply that I left college and, to pursue music. Like that was the whole reason that I was like, my feeling was that if I didn't do that, then later in life I would regret never have tried to do that. I would have regretted not abandoning the supposed security that getting a college education was at that time. I would have regretted not abandoning that in pursuit of something that I thought I would be better at doing. And that would, I thought that if nothing else, I thought at least I had like some kind of unique viewpoint. I don't know that that's true. I think probably it's not. But at the time, I thought that I did. I thought, I have something to say that's unique. Well, probably not. But, and, the irony is too, is that really like one of most of the best songs are the best songs because they are not about a unique viewpoint. They're about something that everyone can share in, and experience, and like that resonates, with everyone. So so I had it kind of backwards, but whatever. I still like think that I don't, it was the right decision for me. Have I not been like upset and, frustrated and exhausted and, all these things for not choosing a more secure and stable route? Yeah, but I mean, somehow I think I would have still ended up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's not really a tweet though.
That's
a tweet.
That's quite all right. So
tweet.
As we wrap up, you mentioned you have a new record out that came out in 2020. Let the listeners know how can people hear it? Where can they find you? Do you have a website? Are you on social media? Are you on Bandcamp? Here's your chance to plug away.
Okay, I'm on Bandcamp. It's Heather Duby, and then I have a website. It's just heatherduby.com, and that has links to stuff and has the other records on there. That's about it. I don't really know that there's much else going on. I have an Instagram account. It's Heather _, underscore, and then Duby. So there's a space in between it. That's it. I'm hoping to play a live show again someday. The last performance I did was at Music Hall of Williamsburg, and I did a show all by myself because I still had the 3-piece band at the time, but they weren't able to make it. So I opened for Minus the Bear and did a solo set. A big hope of mine would be to be able to do that again, especially since after the accident, just to because I have pedals and things so I can make it happen. So I'd like to do that, and I'd like to record again with John, and that's about it.
Awesome. So 22 years later, I'm very happy we had a chance to chat again. I remember that interview back in the day, and it's been great catching up with you.
Were you like, why does she cost so much?
No, like I said, when I started this series, I went down this list of the whole idea behind the Dig Me Out podcast is to dig out things that were overlooked, underappreciated, things that people may not have known about in the 90s. And so when I think about artists, like I said, I listen to Post to Wire at least once a year. And so as I was thinking about artists that I wanted to talk to, it was cool that we had talked once before, because the other bands I've interviewed so far, I didn't have any background with at all. So I was excited to track you down, and happy that you agreed to do this. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Yeah,
Good to catch up.
Yep.